'Twas the night before Wagmas, and all through the camp not a grot was still stirring, not even a lamp. The gubbins were hung by the scrap piles with care, in hopes that the red Gobbo soon would be there. Hello and welcome to a very festive episode of How to Paint. Today we're looking at the red Gobbo. This is Warhammer's end of the year celebration with a fun Warhammer 40k themed miniature. And as you can see, I'm just assembling this as usual with some plastic glue, and then I use super glue to glue them onto the base. And I've just glued on the Gobbo himself and his little Grotmas git next to him, but I've left the snowman still loose because I want to get to those details. And what I'm doing here is just priming the whole miniature in a white. This will save a lot of time on the snow later on and also prep for the contrast paints. And we're kicking things off with a gunship green. I'm using this for the skin tones for the red Gobbo, and I'm just making sure that I'm fairly accurate. I don't really want to ruin this nice white undercoat, so I'm just being really careful where I'm getting the paint and trying to save myself some time in the future. And for the little guy, I'm doing field grey, and this is because I want two different types of skin tone, and I want to make sure that I establish that from the offset with the base colors. And for his Santa-inspired jacket, I'm using wine red. This is a nice deep red color, but it does apply fairly thin, so I found that I needed to do two coats to get a really nice undercoat here. I'm going to be trying to stick to the box art as close as possible, but I am going to make some alterations along the way. And I'm also switching over to a reddish grey, and I'm using this for his trousers. I'm picking colours that kind of have a red undertone to them, so I'm looking for much more warm colours than I normally would. I'm using a contrast paint for his shoes, so this is Black Templar, and this is just a straight application, letting the contrast paint do its thing and the white show through underneath. I'm also using this for all of the belts and the straps. And then would it really be Christmas without deck tan? So of course I had to sneak this in, and I'm using this for his loincloth. Next I'm using a dark wood, and I'm really just trying to save myself some time on the little guy. I don't want to highlight and shadow too much, partly because he's incredibly small, and partly because it's a pretty tough angle to get to. And here's some hardened leather. This is a different shade of brown, but I'm using this for his little boots. My preferred white paint is Bold Titanium White by Monument Hobbies, and I'm using this to kind of clean up all of these overspill areas, especially around the jacket, and anywhere that I may have got it on the snow or anything like that. I'm just going around and cleaning up with this white. Here's some orc skin, and this is a nice vibrant green that I'm just using for his tunic. I'm going for kind of an elf look for him, so I'm just adding this and just getting a quick speed paint pass over his whole outfit. I'm switching over to Citadel Colors Ratling Grime, and I'm going to be using this for the red Gobbo's pistol. This is a bit like the contrast black, but this also has some brown in it, and this is great for kind of a rusty metal look. For the wash, I'm going to be using Coelia Greenshade. This is kind of a strange pick, but I really want to give the overall model some cool shadows despite all these warm colors. I'm going for kind of a contrasting look here. And I've thinned this right the way down with some Lahmian medium. This is a great kind of transparency, if you will, like an opacity. And I'm just gently applying this all over the model. You can see it working really well on the skin colors, and also on that red, it kind of brings it into almost the purple spectrum. Next up, I'm using some Pylar Glacier, and again I've thinned this right the way down with some medium, and I'm just using this on the base for the snow. The base has some great texture detail built in, and I want to highlight that by using this contrast paint. The blue really does give a nice cool tone to the base, and as well it complements the wash on the characters. Once those washes are dry, we're moving on to the highlight stage, and we're starting off with some Sherwood green. I've mixed this into the original gunship green, and it's just going to build up those highlights very slowly, and eventually building up to that Sherwood green color. And because this is such a vibrant kind of forest green, this is really introducing a lot of that warmth back into those colors. So here you can see now I'm using just Sherwood green straight out of the bottle, and I'm just highlighting very carefully on the edge of the fingers and bringing that warmth back into the skin. This is basically what I would normally do for a normal flesh tone, but in green colors instead. So for my highest highlight, I'm using Green Sky, and just very carefully applying this, mixing it into the Sherwood green initially, and just building up those highlights to those brighter colors. And then once I'm happy with that highlight stage, I'll just use pure Green Sky and just highlight the tips of the fingers and the nose. I'm really liking how that blue wash has shaded the loincloth, so I'm going back in with that deck tan and just adding some edge highlights. And likewise for the trousers, I'm using that initial warm grey that we used and then building that up with just a little bit of white added to it. Because I want all of these furs to look really fluffy, I'm just putting a little bit of white on my brush and then kind of dabbing it on and giving that kind of texture back into the sculpt. And then I'm doing the same thing for the snow as well, just in some select areas. And then I'm using Mephiston red for the main color on the jacket. So because we've already got a base of that dark red, this Mephiston red goes on a lot cleaner and you don't have that kind of patchy look to it. It's adding that nice bright red back into the color, but it's also keeping those shadows in that nice purple dark red tone. I really like the way that this blue-green wash has kind of interacted with this red, so I'm going to have to hang on to this and try something in the future with it. I'm going to be using some quick metallics for some of the smaller areas, like his belt buckle for example. This is a Decayed metal. This is a great looking kind of brass color, and just throwing this on here. I'm also using this for his goggles, just very carefully. And then I'm switching over to Elven Gold, and I'm using this for all of these stars on his uniform. I find the scale color metallic range is really awesome because they don't have as many paint flecks in the paint, they just look a lot smoother. And I'm using Baharroth blue, and I'm just adding some dots to the eyes, just very carefully, and kind of hinting at the idea that these have lenses in them. Next I'm using a warm grey, and just quickly adding this to any of the areas on his outfit that have these ties around them. And then I'm finishing out his fake beard with a neutral grey, and then followed by a white highlight. I'm planning on a lot of candy cane striping, so I'm getting some practice in by using this on his little medal initially, and just kind of getting used to the idea of painting very small stripes and trying to be as accurate as possible and not get it onto the white. For some of the Christmas decorations that are hanging off of him, I'm just using that orc skin speed paint, and then once that's applied, I'm then taking a damp brush and pulling away just to give a quick highlight without me having to paint it. And for the other baubles, I'm using blood red. Same process again, just a first initial coat followed by a damp brush just to kind of pull away that highlight. Next up is a Leadbelcher, and this is for any of the areas of metallic that I just didn't really feel like getting with some of the other paints. So for example, the details on the alarm clock and his little earrings and any of the grenade pins, things like that. I'm very carefully painting in some of the base details, trying not to get it onto the snow. If I do, just a couple coats with the white. But here I'm just using that black Templar and just very carefully letting it sink in. And then followed by gunship green for the grenades. I really like the way they painted the fuse on the box art, so I'm going to try to replicate that. This is a Zealot Yellow speed paint, and what I'm hoping to do is kind of wet blend the colors together. So I started off with a small band of that Zealot Yellow, and then I'm using the blood red speed paint and just letting those bleed together. And then finally that contrast black Templar paint, and I thin this right the way down and just letting that go on and kind of blend all three of these colors together. I've also thinned down some of that hardened leather speed paint, and I'm using this as kind of a wash over these Leadbelcher metallic areas to kind of imply rust. You could also use something like a Seraphim Sepia wash if you wanted to. And I'm doing something similar for the little grot on the end here and just painting his eyes with red, and then finally building up his skin tones like I did for the red Gobbo. I'm mixing in a different type of highlight, so instead of building up in 3 colors, I'm now mixing in Deck Tan as my highlight. And then I'm adding some quick highlights to the outfit as well. I'm using a Sherwood green, like I did for the red Gobbo's skin tone, but this time I'm using it for a band around his hat. This helps to kind of make them feel like they're part of a team. And then I'm adding that same blue wash we did for the snow on the hat. The gag on this model is that there's a bomb in the Snowman, and so I'm painting the fins of the bomb on the base here, because I'm painting the Snowman separate and I'm worried I won't be able to get to these once he's glued on. So for the Snowman, we're going to be pretty much using the existing colors that we already have. So this is that Leadbelcher again, and I'm just carefully outlining some of the red candy cane stripes on the bomb itself. This was on the box art and I really liked the way this looked, so I'm just taking my time going around and kind of penciling in these stripes. I'm not worried about being too accurate, I'm just kind of getting in some rough idea of it, because I love the idea that they've painted this on as like a Christmas gag, and so I'm going to be emphasizing that with some battle damage, just using that Leadbelcher and just kind of sponging on some chips and wear. I'm carefully applying some of that hardened leather wash that I mixed up, trying not to get it onto the snow too much, and then just adding in some of that contrast black again for the charcoal buttons. Here's some of that dark wood, and I'm using that for the branches. And then finally a dry brush of gunship green for the pine needles. I really had a lot of fun with the candy stripe pattern, so I'm going to be replicating this on the candy cane. And the easiest way to do this was to kind of paint the stripe on the front, paint the stripe on the back, and then kind of match the two on the top. And then once I was happy with that, I'm then using a contrast black again on his hat. I'm matching the ribbon around the edge to his red overcoat, so I'm using that wine red and then highlighting it with Mephiston red again. I'm using some speed metal and just going around and adding a final highlight to some of the more metallic areas. So for example, this kind of skull design on his hat, and then just adding some scratches and things to the bomb itself. And because I'm a glutton for punishment, I decided to add one more candy stripe to the little guy's hat to kind of marry the whole thing together, and it was super fun to do. Just take your time and just kind of match those two sides. I'm adding a few more details to the alarm clock. This was a neutral grey that I just kind of threw onto the hands, and just a couple of tick marks on the clock face. And then finally, just one more detail. I dabbed on some white onto his boots to kind of replicate the snow kind of clumping up as he's rising up to throw the grenade. So there we have it, the red Gobbo, just in time for Christmas. This was just a super fun little way to end the year. I've painted a miniature every week for a full year, and so this was just a great little celebration, nothing too strenuous. Let me know what you think down in the comments below if you found this tutorial helpful. And also, are you hoping to paint any miniatures this holiday season? Let me know. I should also mention that I've just launched my membership program, and it's got some great rewards like loyalty badges, some fun emojis, and some other really cool, exciting extras. So if you feel like helping out a small channel like myself, first of all, thank you so much. And secondly, hop over to the channel and click on the join button. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, spend it with some loved ones, and who knows, there might be some miniatures under the tree. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.